What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Terminator Training Show. I am Kevin Smith. Today is going to be a bonus episode from the remainder, well, not all of the remainder, but some of the remainder of the questions that I got yesterday on my IG Q&A. Already recorded one episode with probably about 15, 16 answers, and since I finished recording that, I got a lot more questions because I started recording that episode very soon after I posted it. So needless to say, lots more questions. I'm going to try and get to a bunch of them. It's going to be a little bit more rapid fire than usual. Then again, I say that sometimes and I get a little caught up in certain questions that just need more nuance, but I will try and get to a high number and just provide the necessary details without getting too into the weeds. That way we can just knock out higher volume. I'm usually more of a depth guy, but today we're going to go for volume and I'm going to do my best. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. First question, I have some mild Achilles tendinosis. How long is recovery? 27 days and 7 hours and 33 minutes is exactly how long it's going to take you to recover. So depending on how long it's been, you could expect to be recovered pretty soon if it's already been almost that amount of time. Or, maybe if you just went down with it, you might have to wait those 22 days and change. Just kidding. Injury recovery is very individual and it's going to take a varying amount of time for everyone. There's no perfect way to predict it. And it'll depend on lots of things like how long you continued to grind through when you started feeling the symptoms, how long you've been off for, your recovery strategies, like what you're actually doing. Of course, one thing that a lot of people mess up is they will just completely take time off when they mess up a tendon. And although you might have to take a little bit of time off at first so that you can kind of let the pain go away or dial back a little bit, you don't want to take too long off because what ends up happening is your tendons, which coincidentally need more attention and more love than your musculature in order to not atrophy or get smaller or weaker. They get smaller or weaker when you don't subject them to any load or stress. And so it's kind of a balancing act, but eventually you're going to want to subject your tendons to load. And I am not a physical therapist, and I don't want to come off like I'm giving you a rehab plan without knowing anything about you. But certain things like isometrics on maybe a seated calf or standing calf raise machine, where you hold various portions of that rep for really long periods of time. You want to do this when the pain is relatively low. If you're grinding through higher levels of pain, it's really not all that worth it. But if you're staying down in that 2 to 3 out of 10 range and slowly but surely adding time, adding load, adding duration, or something like that, that can start helping the Achilles get stronger. That Achilles tendon needs to be subjected to stress in order to strengthen and therefore heal. So how long it takes, totally different for everyone. There's just way too many variables, way too little that I know about you in order to give you a good answer. But getting on a solid rehab plan, maybe seeing a physical therapist if you need it. But just remember that just resting and not doing anything, not exposing that tendon to any stress whatsoever is, although probably the intuitive approach, it is not the best approach. That thing needs to be stressed in a low pain manner, and slowly but surely it will come back to life and you will hopefully not have that pain anymore. You'll be able to get back into doing everything that you were doing before. Once you do start feeling better, you really don't want to relapse it. So you want to ease back into things that involve a lot of dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, like flexing your foot up and down. You want to kind of tread carefully with running or anything that's impactful, that it just stresses the Achilles over and over again. Wouldn't surprise me if something like that is the reason that you injured it. And of course, you can always consider trying to clean up your running form. A lot of Achilles tendon issues stem from either lots and lots of uphill running. Believe it or not, uphill running is usually a good thing because it's a lower impact, but it does stress the Achilles a little bit more. Or just poor form. Or if you're one of those anti-heel strike people that just at all costs refuses to heel strike and therefore you run on your tippy toes because you overcompensate, then that can just overwork the Achilles tendon as well. And then also, once you get back into it, you can do regular training without pain, without issue. I would really consider going pretty hard and being very, very intentional with your calf raises and really, really doing a lot of seated calf raises, especially seated calf raises for this case, but standing calf raises are fine too. Really holding that stretch at the bottom, focusing on progressive overload, getting your calves super duper strong. Even if you don't care about growing your calves, it's still a really good idea to strengthen them. And Obviously, your calves and your Achilles are different, but they're in the same area, and doing calf raise like exercises will strengthen that over time and make you a little bit more resilient. So best of luck, but can't really give you an exact date on when I expect it to be better. However, regardless of what I say, there's one way to find out. Start getting better and see how long it takes. That's my best advice for you. Next question, would you recommend running the 2 and 5 mile program for a fat loss phase? Yeah, that's totally fine. I will say that if you're going to follow a program during a fat loss phase and you are also interested in performance improvements, you probably will see the most out of all my programs. You'll probably see the most fitness improvements on the 2 and 5 mile. Not because I am telling you to like go and follow it so you can burn extra calories and run your calories off. That's not a very good idea. If you've been listening for a while, you know what I'm talking about. But typically, when you have a lot of weight to lose and you go into a fat loss phase through nutrition and you're also doing running training, you're naturally going to get better at running anyway, of course, because you're training it. But 2, you're going to get a little smaller, and losing weight at a reasonable pace is a great way to become more efficient running. You just have less weight that is causing impact. You have less weight that you have to propel forward. And so you're just going to be better suited to run. Of course, you want to be very reasonable with it. You don't want to be in a huge calorie deficit, do anything super extreme, because that's going to kind of backfire on you, maybe potentially increase your injury risk, maybe mess with your performance quite a bit. So you want to keep things reasonable. I would consider some sort of calorie cycling approach where on the higher intensity days or the higher output days, you eat more food, and on the lower days or the rest days, you cut your calories a little bit more, so you create a bigger deficit on those days. That way you're fueling your training, and even if you are in an overall deficit, you're going to be in a slight recovery deficit naturally. You are at least prioritizing your training sessions and getting calories in when it matters most. So solid idea. Just don't try and like add a bunch of cardio to it or add more stuff to it. And don't go into the program thinking like this training is what's going to create the calorie deficit for me. Figure out your calorie deficit by either figuring out your maintenance, maybe using an online calculator, maybe doing a body weight equation. Like for most people, it's somewhere between body weight times 14 to 16. Unless you're very high body fat percentage, then it might be a little higher. It would be lower. But for the most part, that's a decent maintenance spot. And then you can create a few hundred calorie deficit per day, but look at it more on a weekly basis. So if you need, for example, 2,500 calories per day, then you would multiply that by 7 and make sure that you are averaging 2,500 calories a day. I've talked about calorie cycling any number of times, but that would be the way I would do it. And you should be good to go. And you might feel really good. You might make really good run progress, maybe even better run progress, depending on how much weight you have to lose. You might make better progress than you otherwise would if you weren't also trying to lose weight. So that's not to say that everyone who follows that program should try and lose weight. It's situation dependent. If you don't have a lot of weight to lose or fat to lose, or you don't want to get weaker or something like that, then don't try and lose weight on that plan. And that's all going to come down to nutrition. It doesn't really have to do with the training you're doing. Of course, if you are doing a higher volume training program, you're going to have to eat more food, more calories. But, you want to create your calorie deficit mostly with nutrition, and then use kind of fitness for performance / support of your overall physical health and mental health. And then, of course, I'm guessing your goal is also to get faster at running, which is why you're on the program. So not a bad idea at all. Just be reasonable with it. You should be good to go. Next question, did you have a specific group you wanted to join when you signed up? Yeah, my main goal, and I think this should be everyone's main goal before they go, is to just get selected and make it through, and then make it through the Q course. Because if you're too dead set on the group and you kind of lose focus on the things that are closer and more important, like there's literally a locked door between you and getting to group, and that is selection in the Q course, then you might kind of struggle. So I did want to go to 10th group, and I ended up going to 10th group. I was not like really gung-ho about it. I just wanted to live in Colorado, to be honest with you. It didn't really occur to me like which groups were which AO and who was deploying where and so on and so forth. I just wanted to live in Colorado, and I knew most groups at that time. The GWAP was still going on, so most groups were involved in that, and ended up going to 10th group. And then, of course, I spent a few years at 10th group, went to the long walk, went to OTC, unfortunately did not pass OTC, and then I transferred to 3rd group to finish out my career. I personally like living where I live right now in North Carolina, ironically, better than I liked living in Colorado Springs for several reasons I won't get into, and my wife does as well. So it worked out really well, and we have had the ability or the freedom to move for the last couple of years since I've gotten out, because we both work remotely and we haven't. So that's a pretty good indication that we enjoy where we're at. But 10th group, 3rd group, great times. And I'm sure there's other pros and cons to other groups too. I just haven't been there. Next question. Can you share anything about the reasons you didn't go through OTC? Yeah, I've shared this on several shows lately, but I did not perform to standard. That was the main thing. It was not physical. It was not like me being a head case or anything like that. I just did not perform the way I needed to in CQB, which is the most demanding and most stringent, and they look at you like the most intensely during that phase. And if you don't meet standards, if you don't live up to them, then you're not going to make it. And that's how it should be, because these guys are the best CQB operators in existence. And if you don't meet the standard, you're not going to meet the standard. And I didn't meet the standard. And it was unfortunate, but oh well, here I am today, not even in the Army anymore. Who knows if I'd still be in the Army, or if I'd be out talking to you guys, probably still be in the Army had I made it through. So worked out for the better, but it was rough at the time. Really hard to see any silver linings, but looking back on it, 7 years later, I am honestly kind of happy it happened, because I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about how not to deal with failure and a bunch of other things. So yeah, that is about as detailed as I'm going to go, just out of respect for the unit and their mystique. I don't like to get into super nitty gritty details. Next question, favorite electrolyte chews and gels. So I take gels for carbohydrate reasons. Some gels do have a little bit, and chews do have a little bit of sodium in them, maybe some potassium. Some of them have some more electrolytes than other ones, but in something that size, you're not going to get sufficient electrolytes usually to support hydration. And this is also assuming that you're drinking water on the side and not just taking gels and not drinking any water. That won't go well for you. But my favorite gels that I use for carbohydrates are Morton 160s or 100s. The 160s have 40 grams of carbohydrates. The 100s have 25. I also like Precision 30s, and I also like SIS, Science and Sport Beta Fuel. Those are for 40 grams of carbohydrates per, and they all are pretty mild flavored. They don't like really mess with my palate or make me feel super nauseous or gaggy, which is good. Like, you absolutely can get some palate fatigue from taking goos, and I find the really, really fruity, like kind of strong flavored ones are okay for me at the beginning of a run when I'm not yet super fatigued and stressed, but later on in the session, I struggle with like really, really intense fruity flavors. So I stick with those mild flavors I just went over. Beta Fuel can be a little bit fruity, but the other two are very mild. For electrolytes, normally, if I'm not doing any sort of training and I'm just sitting around, so I don't really want sugar, I want some sugar-free electrolytes, I will use Quench Hydration, and I have a discount code in the description if you're interested in 15% off. Great mix of sodium and potassium and magnesium in proper ratios, and it's not like a big-time overload of sodium like an Element packet. Element's great, don't get me wrong, but most people don't need to drink 1,000 milligrams of sodium in one sitting. They really don't. If you're training a lot, sweating a lot, it's the summertime, whatever, then absolutely. But I like the Quench because it's just easier to titrate the dose down than it is to like try and guess how much of a packet to get if I want, say, 400, 500, 600 milligrams of sodium and not a full gram of sodium. If I am training and I want some carbs and some electrolytes at the same time, then I'll use Tailwind or Scratch. Those are both solid drink mixes. As long as you get the mix right, you don't do too many scoops compared to the water and therefore overmix it, and therefore just make it so that it's honestly just going to be like pure carbohydrates, but your body's not going to really handle it all that well because you're under stress and the osmolarity is off. If you mix it well, you're going to be good to go. I really like, especially for longer events, I like to go back and forth between liquid and solid. So liquid and goos and gels, because like I said, after you continue to have the same thing over and over again, it gets really old and hard to stomach. So I like to switch back and forth. But usually if you're going for gels, it's going to be a fueling thing. And then usually the liquid, although they also have carbohydrates and fuel, most of them have electrolytes in them as well. So you can mix those with water and it supports your hydration as well as your fueling. And then going back and forth just helps limit palate fatigue. Next question, what goes through your mind for movement selection and sequencing in a training day? I love this question so much. I'm a big time nerd and this is like the nerd question. And this stuff matters a lot more than what most people think. I did not answer it on Instagram just because it's super nuanced. So although I'm trying to rapid fire here, this one's going to be a little bit more of a detailed answer. It might take a little bit, but super duper important to select the right exercises and also sequence them properly throughout your training session in order to get the most out of them. And it's always going to be different. So for exercise selection, I have a 5-question criteria that I like to use. 1, do I need to do this exercise for my sport or for my competition? For example, a non-lifting example. If I was prepping for a marathon, I would have to run. Like, there's no other way to do it. Like, you're not going to do well if you don't run for a marathon. So I would have to do that as part of my training. If I was prepping for a marathon, would I have to swim? No, I don't have to swim at all. Do I have to bike? Nope, I don't have to bike at all. It's nice to cross train, but you don't have to do anything specific like that. Back to lifting. If I am a power lifter, I'm going to have to do a squat, bench, and deadlift. Not every single time I train, maybe not year round, but I'm at least going to have to do those specific lifts to perform best in my competition, my powerlifting meets. So unless you are a sport athlete that literally requires a barbell lift, a specific one, whether it's an Olympic lift or a power lift, or maybe you're a CrossFitter and you have to do a little mix of a bunch of different lifts. If you're not any of those things, then there are no required movements. There are only required movement patterns. So real quick, going through the movement patterns, then we'll get to the rest of the steps. Movement patterns are squat, pretty simple, hinge, things like deadlifts and deadlift variations, vertical and horizontal presses, so overhead press or semi-overhead press, and a horizontal press like a bench press or a dumbbell press. Then they're the same thing except pull. So vertical pull would be something like a chin up or a pull up, pull down, and then a horizontal pull would be more of a row. So anyway, going back, do I have to do this exercise or not? I do not compete in any sports or events or athletics that require any specific lifts. So all lifts are fair game. I don't have to do anything specific. I don't have to do barbell squats. I don't have to do deadlifts and so on. And then step number 2, this one takes a little bit of experience and a little bit of knowing yourself. But if you just do step 2 immediately, it will potentially cut out step 3, 4, and 5. So step 2 is, are there any blatant offenders, lifts that no matter what I've tried before and or I used to do and I just don't like them for whatever reason, whether they bang my joints up or they just smoke me for a couple days, or maybe I don't even have access to the machine or the piece of equipment that has them. Obviously, those exercises are out. For me, these days, that is the barbell bench press. It is the barbell back squat. Specifically low bar, I could do a high bar squat, but I just really don't. And those exercises just kind of bang me up. And I'll get into kind of why, because if you don't have the answer to that question, like you're not sure if you have any exercises that are absolute no-goes, then step 3, 4, and 5 are the important ones because they will tell you which ones are goes and no-goes. So say, for example, I said, nope, I don't have any blatant offenders, even though I did just list that the squat and bench press are out for me, but let's pretend I didn't. Step 3, can I feel this lift in my target musculature? So if it's a squat, can I feel it in my quads? If it's a hinge, can I feel it in my glutes and hamstrings? If it's a press, can I feel it in my chest? Or a horizontal press going for chest, can I feel it in my chest? If it's a row, can I feel it in my upper back, my lats, my mid back, just depending on the angle of pull? If the answer is yes, great. Now we're cooking. We got still all the exercises that you haven't checked off yet, all available. The next 2 questions are super important. Question number 4, do I feel this exercise in my joints? And what I mean by that is, say you go and you do a back squat and maybe you do feel it a little bit in your quads. So you didn't completely eliminate that from the last one, but maybe you feel it really bad in your knees. Like your knees are kind of banged up after, or your lower back or your hip, whatever it is. And if the answer is yes to that, usually for most people, the best option is to just eliminate that movement. However, you can also, if you want to do that movement for whatever reason, you can work on that movement, whether you work on the skill, the technique, the mobility, maybe you change your execution up a little bit over time to kind of develop the ability to do it where you can feel the musculature and also it doesn't bang your joints up. That's a solid option too, but usually for most people, there's going to be plenty of options for each movement pattern that if you feel in your joints, you can just choose a different exercise. The last question that I like to ask myself is, does this completely destroy me for a couple days after? For example, if I did a super heavy deadlift and I did it too often, it will really beat me up. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the deadlift is out, and it doesn't mean that I can't do like deadlift variations or just manage my deadlift training to like reduce the frequency with which I do them. Like during my ultra prep, I would do deadlifts like once every 7 to 9 days, and I felt okay on that. But if you have a lift, say it's a back squat, and for like 2-3 days afterwards, you are just kind of a little bit, if it affects your other training, it affects your daily life, you just don't feel really good, you feel run down, whether you're in pain, like if you also answered yes to the last one and it bangs your joints up and it smokes you, that's usually like a no-brainer exercise you're not going to do. But even if it doesn't bang up your joints and you do feel it in your target muscle, but it just destroys you for a couple days and it interferes with your subsequent training, then that might be a reason to potentially consider an alternative. So those 5 questions will give you a really, really good idea of certain exercises to eliminate. And then to choose your exercises, you can kind of see which ones you feel most in your target muscle. For example, I feel belt squats and pendulum squats by far the most out of any squat in my quads. They don't bang my knees up, and also they don't smoke me for a few days. So those are my favorite 2 squats. Those are not the only 2 squats I do. I do leg presses, I do single leg stuff, absolutely. But those are like my go-to. For push, the exercises I feel most in my chest and least in my joints, and that bang me up least, are things like deficit push-ups. I really like a machine press on a Nautilus that we have at our gym, like a really, really nice seated Nautilus press, and some other exercises like that. Exercises I feel in that target muscle, but not so much in my joints. And I just go through each movement pattern, and I don't necessarily do this now. It takes time and experience, but when you are just starting out, you're trying to find the best exercises for you for each movement pattern. You can ask yourself those questions about them, and that'll give you a really good idea of which lifts are kind of like, no, I'm not going to do those, and which lifts are like, yes, these are my go-to lifts. These are my Mount Rushmore for each muscle group or each movement pattern. As far as sequencing, even more nuance, because what you might see for, say, an 18-year-old who just started lifting, the way he sets up his training session is going to be really different, or it should be, although it's not always, but it should be if you're programming properly or getting coached properly, very different than someone who's 48 years old and has been lifting for 25 years. Because most of the time when you are newer, or if you have a specific lift that you really want to get really good at, or if your main goal is just to kind of get strong and you're not super advanced, so on and so forth, oftentimes starting with the biggest compound movement or the priority of that session, like the very first lift or maybe second lift or maybe after a warm-up, would be a really good idea. So for example, if I was a 25-year-old power lifter and my main goal was to, maybe I have a really strong deadlift and a strong squat, and I want to get my bench up, which kind of was my case. I wasn't a power lifter, but bench has always been my worst one. But I have to get my bench up. Like, I have to work on it. So I would do the bench press more often. I would really focus on the bench quite a bit. But B, I would try and do that every time I do it when I'm relatively fresh. That way I have the most amount of focus. My nervous system's fresh, and I can really, really put a lot of effort into that, and I'm not smoked from other training before that. That being said, say I'm a 35-year-old former SF guy. Well, coincidentally, I actually am. And I've spent lots and lots of time doing lots and lots of barbell lifts, training way too much, honestly, just beating my body to pulp. Then I'm not going to start with a bench press. Even if I going back to the earlier part of the question, I said I don't bench press, but just for example, I would not start with a bench press or even just a big, heavy barbell lift in general, because A, I don't really care about what my bench press is anymore. B, it bangs me up. C, if you have a little bit of a pump in certain muscles going into your main lifts, you're going to have to dial back the load a little bit, but you're still going to get the same stimulus. So it's a little bit of an ego check, but it is highly beneficial to do long term because your joints are going to feel better. You're going to feel less banged up. So on a chest day for me, we'll eliminate the bench because I don't do the bench, but I would do something instead of just going in and loading like the Smith machine, because I feel pretty damn good on the Smith machine. I really like a Smith machine, like low incline press, especially with a reverse band. But normally I'll go in and do some jumping push-ups to kind of get my nervous system ramped up. And oftentimes I'll do some like flies and basically seated flies, regular flat flies with a cable. And I will just get a decent chest pump, and you put your shoulder through pretty big range of motion. You get that nice big stretch. I usually make it so it's a little bit more shortened overload. The benefit of using cables for flies is you can make it short overload, so it's like harder when your hands get closer together. And you can, if you have a free motion machine, you can adjust it so that the tension is the most at that short position. Basically, when the cable is about perpendicular or 90 degree to your arms, that's when the tension is going to be the most. So you kind of put the cables out wide. You can kind of picture it if you think of those free motion machines that go up and down and in and out each arm. So I'll do that, and I'll get a little bit of a chest pump. My shoulders feel really good. I'll probably go and do an upper back movement, usually a light one, whether it's a face pull or something similar, just to get a nice upper back pump. Then I'll go to the Smith machine, and I feel great. I'm very warmed up. Will I use as much weight as I could if I just went in fresh and just started with that? No. But do I care? No, because I feel better that way, and it's less likely to beat me up. And because I'm a little bit fatigued, I'm going to have to use less weight, but I'm still getting the same stimulus out of it, despite it being less weight. And therefore, my joints feel better because I'm using less weight and I'm already warmed up better. So that was just one example, but usually, if you have a lift that you really want to work on, whether it's squat, bench, deadlift, clean, something like that, I would do that towards the beginning of your training session. You don't always have to do it first. I almost for everyone would recommend, besides like brand new trainees that really don't do like a lot of isolation movements, but for a lot of people, I would recommend doing something like a seated leg curl or a lying leg curl before they get into squats, just to get that good hamstring pump. Most people use that exercise as a check the block exercise. And that's a mistake because most people are very quad dominant and they need to bring their hamstrings up. But when you do hamstring curls at the very, very end of your training session, when you're already smoked and you kind of just like don't really care, then you're not really going to bring your hamstrings up for that exercise. And it's a low fatigue exercise and it doesn't really involve the quads, but I still have like put my knees through flexion and extension several times. I've got a little hamstring pump going on and I feel a lot warmer. And then I would go into like a main squat movement. And if you've never tried that, I would highly recommend trying it. You might, if you follow some of my programs, I do program that way. I have that type of sequencing. But you also notice if you follow multiple of my programs, depending on what the goals are, the sequencing is a little different because it's different for everyone. So generally speaking, the older and or more banged up you get, and or the less you care about getting jacked or really strong in a specific lift, the closer to what I would consider reverse order programming. So instead of doing squats, then single leg squats, then stiff legged deadlift, and then finishing off with maybe like leg curls and leg extensions, I would consider doing at least leg curls first, maybe even leg extensions just to get a pump in the quads, especially if you have bad knees. Having a pump in the quads and the hamstrings is usually a good idea. And also another great option when you're warming up for squats, or even if you're in between sets of your main squat movement, if you have a seated calf raise machine sort of nearby, you can go hop on that. You don't necessarily have to do really, really hard sets, but put a decent amount of load on it and really focus on going super deep and getting your ankle as mobilized as possible. So you're going down into that bottom stretch, holding it for a couple seconds, driving your toes up towards your shins, aka dorsiflexion. And you will find that your ankles are more mobile. And if you want to go hard on them, you definitely can. You can get a good calf pump. And I coincidentally also have weak calves and want to bring them up. So I like to train them when they're fresh. And it also just helps me warm up for squats and get mobile. So honestly, this could be an entire episode, and maybe I'll do that in the future. I don't think a lot of the listeners are big time training programming nerds, hypertrophy nerds. But if you are, and you want to leave me a comment either on Spotify or YouTube, I would happily do an entire episode on exercise selection and sequencing, and maybe a couple other factors like rest periods, sets, reps, and rest periods, just the basic principles of programming, but also covering some of the nuances that I just went over, like sequencing for different goals and different people and different ability levels. So really cool question. Glad you asked. And without making it into a full episode, we're going to go on to the next one. Next question, what are your initial thoughts on the Nordic Track? Worthy purchase? Yeah, I absolutely love it. It even has my wife running. My wife, when we first met, she was into running. And since then, she's kind of just like, she never lifted. And I taught her how to lift. I kind of taught her how to lift. She also did some CrossFit, but I like almost talked her into lifting more often. And ever since then, she's been big into lifting, and she still walks a lot. She's very active, but she hasn't really been doing any running or anything like that, but it's got her running. So that's a win. Getting her aerobically more healthy is always a good thing. And I have not done a lot of run workouts on it just because it's really nice outside and I would prefer to run outside. I'm also not running all that much. And I am doing stuff mostly on softer surfaces. Not that like doing on an incline treadmill would be that stressful or anything, but the only thing I've used it for so far is incline walking and a couple of like fast, hard hill sprints. And so far, so good. Really awesome. It goes up to 40% incline. I haven't put it up to 40 yet. I think the highest I put it up to was 30 for a walk. And it's pretty damn steep. Like you can almost reach out and touch it in front of you. The other cool thing about it is it goes on a decline too. You can go decline. So if you have like a overuse related shin splint, so there's a couple different reasons for shin splints. One could be impact. That's probably more common, but also some people have like overuse of the tibialis muscles type shin splints, and it kind of just messes with that tendon a little, and that can benefit from downhill running, believe it or not. So I like that feature as well. And there are a few things that are a little confusing, like it doesn't have cup holders or like water bottle holders. It's got like a flat surface you can put it on, and the machine's super stable, so like the water won't fall over unless you hit it. But that one's a little confusing, and I wish it had more of a quick and simple and more streamlined way to go up and down on speed. It does have a lot of features on the screen, and it has the buttons in front of you, but I wish it was like a little toggle or something like that so I could go up, down, speed and incline, like a lot of treadmills do, like on the left side and the right side. But aside from that, it's freaking amazing. And I haven't even used like all the iFit features yet. You can do like a bunch of different iFit activities. You can go and choose your landscape and like run through the Alps and shit like that. I have not ventured into that, but I'll probably do it at some point soon. Once it gets hot out and I start doing speed work again, if it's like crazy hot out, I'll just do some speed work on the treadmill in the garage so it's a little cooler. I got a fan in there, and we're also going to get an AC. But so far so good. Highly recommend. Do you need to get the high end one, like the X20? What do I have? I think I have the I24 or something like that. It's their newest, highest rated one, and you don't necessarily have to get that. There's a bunch of different options, but so far so good. Love it. Next question, can you dive deeper into sled drags? Why would you use them, and what should the focus be? Yeah, you can use sleds for a bunch of different reasons and a bunch of different outcomes or goals. So you could use a sled for conditioning. You could use a sled for strength. You could use it for power. You could even use it for hypertrophy, although the sled is not going to make your legs super jacked. It's still a stimulus. Like you still might get some leg growth from them, especially if you're doing other things too, just because there's no eccentric component. And that eccentric component is important for hypertrophy, but also it's fatiguing. So a great thing about the sled is you can get some stimulus without over fatiguing yourself. If you're using it for conditioning, you want to go a little lighter and longer. You know, if you have like a 50 yard or 70 yard, whatever, strip of turf, and you just want to get like a zone 2 session in, you can go down and back just endlessly. Or like me, I have out behind my house, I've got like a 0.75 mile dirt path, sand path, and I bring my sled out and I just walk back and forth. And that's more conditioning. It gets me up into zone 2, and it's great. For power, something like very light load, and you're almost like a hill sprint, except you're using a sled. You're basically just sprinting as fast as you can on the sled, like the uprights of the sled your arms are holding. That'll slow you down a little. It'll shorten your stride a little, and it'll put you a little more bent over, so you're less likely to pull a hamstring or tear a hamstring or something like that. So that's a great use for them. Strength, load them pretty heavy. Maybe do 5 to 7 steps per foot. Take a break, load heavy again, 5 to 7 steps, take a break. Almost like you're doing sets of 5 to 7 on a squat. You can even do less than that if you want. I just think it's a little crazy to go super duper heavy where you can only do a couple reps, unless you have like really, really high traction shoes, because a lot of times you're just going to be limited by your shoes slipping out from under you. It does depend on the surface and the shoes. And by the way, surface and temperature and type of sled is all so different. So it's like really hard to give prescriptions for like what loads to use and things like that. Because if you're on turf, it's going to feel different than if you're on grass, which is going to feel different than if you're on pavement, which is going to feel different than if you're on sand, and yada, yada. So very, very different, but you kind of just got to get a feel for it. Also, different times of day. So like turf in the morning when it's super humid is going to be a little more sticky than it will be later in the day after it's been baking in the sun. Little nuances like that. And that's one of the main reasons I don't like program, hey, use this exact weight for this exact surface, because it's just so different. And then you got sleds like the ones with the wheels on them too. So hard to program exact loads, but if you just have the concept down. And then lastly, for hypertrophy that I mentioned, would be like probably higher reps, maybe 12 to 20 steps per foot, where you're going pretty close to like you're getting a really solid pump. I would do something like this, like later in a training session after you've already hit your quads with other exercises that put them through a full range of motion, eccentric and concentric, because this, again, is just concentric only, but it's still very effective and could be a great way to kind of finish off, especially if you suffer from knee issues when you do a lot of squatting type movements. The sled can be a great way to just get quad stimulus without really putting the knees through too much stress. And lastly, I would say a great way to kind of warm up on a leg day would be to do some light backward sled drags. And that can be a good way to kind of just strengthen your knee joint and make you a little more durable. If you do like higher volume, but not quite as high intensity backward sled drags, you're going to get a lot of great results from that. So lots of different use cases, lots of different goals that it can apply to. And the great thing about sleds is they are very low skill. They don't require a lot of athleticism. They don't require a lot. There's no like high injury risk or anything like that. So pretty much anyone can get on a sled. And that's one of the cool things about them. And they don't really make you that sore. They don't damage your musculature that much, even though they're acutely fatiguing in the moment. They're easy to recover from. So you can kind of just get a good little stimulus without messing yourself up too much. So love the sled. Definitely use it. Next question. I'm 5'8", 167 pounds. I run a sub 13 2-mile and I need help with lifting. Which program will help? All right. So if you want to continue to run, which I'm guessing you probably do, even if you are running sub 13, if you stop running, you probably won't be running sub 13 anymore. So what I would recommend is a hybrid program. You could either hop on T850, you could do Jack Gazelle, or you could do Jack Gazelle 2.0. Those would all be solid programs. If you're a little newer to running lifting, and or you want to focus a little more on your running and you want to get faster, then the 2 and 5 mile will be awesome, because there's definitely plenty of lifting in that to get strong. And honestly, it's not a hybrid program, but lots of guys follow it and report back that they got stronger. So I guess kind of it is, even though it's more supposed to be more running biased. So any of those programs would work really well for you. Jack Gazelle original is more powerlifting dominant for the lifts. 2.0 is a little more hypertrophy for the lifts. It's got a little bit more well-roundedness. It's got some jumps and throws and things like that, strongman work. And then 2 and 5 mile is mostly running, but it's got 3 training sessions a week for lifting. I think in the first phase and the second phase is only 2, because the running intensity is higher in phase 2. And then T850 is similar to kind of a mix of Jack Gazelle and Jack Gazelle 2.0. It's just a subscription based. So it's delivered on an app, and you can kind of hop on that and hop off whenever you want. And it updates every 6 weeks. Like the new training block starts every 6 weeks. So any of those can help. Just kind of depends on what you're going for lifting wise. Next question, opinion on the tactical barbell program / books. Yeah. So I have not thoroughly read all of their programs or all of the little different parts of their programming. If you've been listening for a little while, you probably are aware that I am not a huge fan of just telling everyone to go lift with barbell. I think the barbell is a great tool and it's awesome to get strong. And when you're starting out, if you can master the barbell movements, the squat, the bench, the deadlift, the bent row, the overhead press, and kind of everything in between there, then you are setting yourself up with a great foundation for long-term lifting. However, I don't think that the barbell is appropriate. Honestly, I know for a fact the barbell for all those lifts is less appropriate than maybe using a barbell for some. And going back to that earlier question for the exercise selection criteria and figuring out which exercises to not use barbells for, using a barbell all the time, generally what happens, unless you have great mobility, great skill, and a lack of ego, which is very rare. I don't see a lot of people with all 3 of those things. When you use a barbell too much, oftentimes you're just going to end up getting some joint issues, and it's going to be kind of a needless thing because there's so many other options besides a barbell. For example, if a barbell bench press bangs up your shoulders like it does to mine, and you get that book and you don't really read, at least I haven't seen like, hey, if these lifts bang you up, here are some substitutions. I would guess they probably have substitutions, but either way, a lot of people are just going to go and be like, okay, I'm going to bench. I'm just still going to bench. And if you don't have the wherewithal to kind of identify the fact that the bench is not serving you and you just keep grinding it out, you're not going to really hit your bench numbers because you're always just going to be banged up or plateaued or just smoked. And you could easily just grab some dumbbells or use a machine or do deficit push-ups and get great results from that too. So I would say it's a solid baseline strength program for people who are a little bit less advanced. And I would say as you get more advanced and you realize, because everyone's going to eventually realize this, whether they actually consciously know it or not, you're going to probably realize at some point using the barbell for every lift is just no longer the optimal thing for you. The thing about the barbell is it's very old school compared to the current equipment arsenal that is available in gyms across America, as well as, people get home gyms, stuff that you can equip yourself with. The barbell is one of many tools, and it's probably the most commonly seen tool in a gym. Like most gyms are going to have barbells in them, but also it's not the most longevity friendly tool to use for every single movement pattern. I personally think that the hinge is the most barbell friendly movement pattern in existence because it doesn't rely on shoulder joint mobility. It doesn't rely on elbow mobility. You're just holding on, and that's basically the weight is bringing you down into that hinge and you're resisting against the weight. Whereas if you are actually moving with that barbell, whether you're doing a row or you're doing a press or you have your shoulders locked in up on your back, then it's going to require some mobility. And if you just continue to do it and progressively overload, force progression, and kind of don't really think anything of it, eventually you're going to think something of it because you're probably going to be a little banged up. So I don't have enough of a good solid understanding of the books or the programs. I've definitely glanced at them. I own them, but I haven't read all the way through them. But I do know that my opinion differs and my experience differs from theirs, obviously, because I use the barbell a whole hell of a lot less. I definitely program lifts for clients with barbells, but there's also other alternatives. And oftentimes you're just going to be better off longevity wise if you use that criteria that I talked about earlier and choose your own lifts. Nothing but respect for them. There are many paths to Rome, and my path is just a little different than theirs. There's nothing wrong with that. Next question, how exactly should you prep for special forces? I would start by listening to as many episodes of this show as you can. There are 165 to choose from, so that'll give you a really good idea for it. Episode 71, I believe, I broke down soup to nuts how I'd prepare for SF. It was a little bit, it wasn't all-inclusive or anything like that, but it was pretty good. A recent episode where I went over specifically how to prep for rucking, that'll give you a really good idea of how to do it. I've also got, I'm not 100% sure what number this is, but I've got an old episode on if I were 1 year out from selection, here's what I would start considering, not just with training, but other things too, skills, character, and things like that. So you can kind of search through. I talk about SFAS in just about every single episode I've ever done. So that's a good start. You can check out my YouTube. You can also check out my Instagram. I've got 1,350 posts. So a lot of them talk about SFAS, but I unfortunately can't really talk through an all-inclusive SF prep plan. I don't know anything about you. I don't know your timeline. I don't know your strengths and weaknesses. But the good thing is you know where your end goal is and you know where you're starting. So I would identify where you're starting. Am I completely unathletic? Have I never played any sports in my life? Or am I pretty damn good at running, but I'm kind of weak? Then maybe focus on your strength a little bit more. Or am I really strong, but I can't run a mile? Focus on building your aerobic base and just kind of go from there. Of course, character is super important. Agency, competence, confidence, the ability to speak with people, the ability to build relationships. So charisma, all those are super critical skills to kind of develop. And a lot of people think that because they're character traits, they're just set in stone. And that's not the case. Character traits are just a series of skills. So you can reverse engineer that character trait by identifying which skills are part of that trait and then kind of building back from there. I also have several episodes where I talk about kind of building character too. So you can check back for those. And yeah, practice your land nav. See if you can get out to one of Voodoo's musters or join an orienteering club. And maybe practice your knot tying and just be a good dude, be fit, and enjoy the process. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. If you're 1 year out, year and a half out, whatever it is, and you're super anxious about I hope I get selected. you're thinking too far in the future. Just enjoy every day of the process, every step of every day of the process. And any number of my content should absolutely give you a good, solid idea. Of course, it's not all inclusive, but if you piece it together and continue listening to, because I'm going to keep talking about it, then you should have a pretty good idea. And there's lots of stuff on the internet too. So if you need a program, maybe check out Jack Gazelle 2. Maybe don't follow SFAS yet because you're probably way far out. Don't make the mistake of being a perpetual selection prepper where you just hop on an SFAS program and do it over and over and over again. It's not a good idea, but lots of different options to start with. Just kind of depends on where you're at, what you're going for. Next question, what makes a good client versus a bad client? So a bad client, I would only say for a bad client, people who don't invest in their progress. A lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot, but some people have this idea that hiring a coach is like the last thing they need to do. And then there's no effort on their part. Like the coach is just going to show you the way and carry you the way. And that's not how it works with fitness. I unfortunately cannot control everything you do. So I will absolutely, as a coach, give you everything you need to do and I'll work with you. And everyone kind of responds a little differently. Everyone's got their nuances between, what works best for them, whether it's communication style or training wise, their strengths and weaknesses. But I can't hold your hand, especially virtually. I can't hold your hand and just take you there. You're going to have to do some work on your own. I know most people understand that, but I've had clients that think like, I hired a coach and it just didn't work. Well, guess what? You didn't put the work in required because it does take work in order to get physically more capable. Other clients that I would consider bad are just people who ghost. There's occasionally someone who we start working together and things are going well and then they fall off the face of the earth and I never hear from them again. I reach out via email, I reach out via my app and nothing. So that's really about it. I mean, most of my clients, we handpick them. We use a very strict criteria to kind of pick the right applicants or what we think are the right applicants from the application. And we usually do pretty well. My wife helps me with this. That's why I'm saying we. Good clients are the ones who are most invested in their progress and doing their part of the deal, of the bargain. So I tell them what to do. I show them what to do. We talk about what to do and they go fucking do it. And they don't complain. They ask questions when they have questions. They give me updates when they have updates. And honestly, some guys I hear from a lot because they like to update me and they have questions and I'm all for that. Other guys I don't hear from as much and things are going fine and that's okay. You don't have to fabricate as a client. I've had this before too. Clients will fabricate issues and problems that they think that they need to be coached more by me. And so they will almost kind of think way more things are problems than actually are problems. And we'll just have to kind of get to the bottom of it. Not a huge deal. But some guys, I just give them the plan and we talk once in a while and they go do it and they crush and they make great progress and they don't really hit me up all that often. And that's totally fine. I'm cool with that. But some guys are really, really into learning and being part of the process, almost like being the agent in charge of their own trajectory with my guidance and my help. So they'll ask me questions. We'll nerd out on fitness topics. We'll nerd out on SF or other things too. And that's super fun too. So being invested is honestly the best thing you can do as a client and holding up your end of the deal. Even though, yes, as a client, you're paying your coach can't do everything for you. He has to give you the plan and the blueprint. And then you go and do your part in order to follow that blueprint and hopefully hit your goals. Next question, any pros to using a dumb watch during selection prep, or is it Garmin the way to go? That's a funny one. Dumb watch. I guess technically the old school watches, the Casios and the Timexes and the G-Shocks are technically dumb watches. And would I use a dumb watch? I honestly think it's not a bad idea at all because at selection, you're not going to have any watch on for any of your runs or your rucks. And a lot of people just get way too wrapped around the axle with what their watch is telling them. They look at their watch every couple seconds on an entire run. And not only is that going to increase the stress of the run, but it's also going to take power away from you. You're almost a puppet to your watch because your watch is telling you, oh, your heart rate's this, you got to slow down. Oh, your speed, you're outside your speed range, you got to speed up, you got to slow down. And you kind of lose touch with the ability to listen to your body and make your own decisions, which is going to be a non-negotiable when you're at selection because you just won't know what your pace is. You won't know how long you're going. So you need to be really in tune with how your body feels at certain paces. And even if you don't have something that's telling you your pace, whether you have a dumb watch on or you don't have anything on, most people, if they're aware enough and mindful enough, can tell when they're going around their threshold pace, or maybe a little faster than their threshold pace, or a little slower. You get that by just repetitively training and training and training. And if you always just have a watch telling you what your threshold pace is, or whether you're at it, or what your heart rate is, then you kind of lose touch with that. Don't get me wrong. If you're mindful enough about it and you're aware of this discrepancy or this kind of nuance between like, should I make all decisions based on my watch, or should I actually make decisions myself based on how I'm feeling, then using a smartwatch is totally fine. Absolutely fine. But I would say if you are someone who kind of is really worried about their ability to run the unknown distance runs, and you're like, I have no idea how fast to go, how slow to go, or if you're one of those people that are just a puppet to your watch, you're just watch obsessed and always looking at it and never making your own decisions, then it'd be a great idea to wear a dumb watch. Or what I like to do sometimes too, so I have the data from the run, is I'll either do this, I don't do this myself very often. I have a couple times, but I do it with clients sometimes. We do a house arrest run where I just have them put their watch around their ankle. So they still have the data afterwards. If they wear a heart rate strap, they can still get the heart rate data. Not that wrist heart rate is all that accurate, but it's more accurate than wearing around your ankle, especially around a sock. But also, they can't look at it during the run. So they are making their own decisions. They're going off feel, and it's a great, great thing to learn and do. Now, you don't have to do this every single run. If you're just kind of starting out, you don't really have to. Usually I like to do this a little further away from selection when pacing doesn't matter as much, like hitting your exact paces, your goal paces doesn't matter. If you go back a couple episodes ago, I think it was 163, the rucking episode, I talked about the support phase before you get into your specific phase. That's when I like to really learn RPE for running and how your body feels at certain efforts. But you could do it for some runs and you'd be really well off. Don't have to, but definitely a decent consideration to go dumb watch once in a while. Next question, showing up to a team in 4 months after language, training advice for now until then. Hell yeah, you got the right idea. So if you've been listening for a while, I've talked about this a little, but some guys just kind of fall off a cliff and they don't take advantage of the extra time and schedule freedom and consistency of their schedule and predictability of their schedule and their lives during ranger school or during language school, and they kind of fall off. Either they get super jacked, all they do is bodybuild, which you don't have to be super crazy jacked and unable to run. You shouldn't be super crazy jacked and unable to run when you show up to a team. Or they just don't train at all, or they barely train. They just do enough to maybe get by. And both of those are major mistakes. The time in which you should be most focused on getting as fit and capable as possible physically is during language, because you're about to show up to your team and you're about to make a first impression to your team. And first impressions really fucking matter. So if you show up and you're not fit, you do the first team workout that you guys do, or maybe they have you, do a PT test or something like that, and you suck at it. That's a terrible first impression. And you're going to have to work really, really, really hard in the future to overcome that. And I honestly think as a male that cares about being well-rounded and doing the best they possibly can in general in life, you should just always maintain your fitness. You don't always have to train 6 days a week. You don't always have to do 2-a-days. You don't always have to burn it down, but you should at least not fall off. Falling off is just a sign that you are not disciplined enough and or you're not good enough at building habits and doing things regardless of whether you feel like doing them or not. And that bleeds into other areas of life. If you lack discipline in one area, doesn't mean you lack discipline in every area, but it definitely is a sign, especially if it's an area like this, fitness. Like the foundation of being a good SF guy is fitness. If you lack discipline there, who's to say that you're going to not lack discipline in something else that's important, like staying up to date on your MOS skills or your shooting skills or whatever it may be when you show up to group, all the other things you need to be good at. So how would I train? I would definitely train to be relatively well-rounded. Definitely know where you're at physically. Like, are you a little bit weaker at the endurance end, or are you a little bit weaker at the strength end? If you're a decent balance of both, that's honestly like really solid. That's a good place to be. Most people are going to be good, a little bit better at one or the other. For me, I was significantly better at endurance when I was during this part of the Q course. So I really, really doubled down on lifting. I definitely continued to do endurance training. I did basically give or take Jack Gazelle version 1 during language with a couple different spin-offs. I was not as programming savvy back then as I am now, but that's pretty much how I train. So that would be a decent option. Jack Gazelle 2 is a great option. T850 is also a great option. If you're a weaker runner, you could consider the 2 and 5 mile as you get close. That way you can follow it like going into group, and you'll still be strong because there's lifting in there. So anything like that, just some sort of hybrid training program, whether you're lifting 3 days a week, maybe 4 days a week, probably don't need to lift any more than 4 days a week. And then getting some conditioning in on the non-lifting days, as well as some days maybe doubling up and doing lift plus conditioning would be a good way to do it. And yeah, like I said, just show up fit like you fucking care about your profession and you care about the fact that you're a new guy and you're the low man on the totem pole and you really can't bring anything to the table other than your fitness. So fucking work on your fitness and make sure you show up to group as fit as you physically possibly can. That doesn't mean you have to be the fittest person on your team or the fittest person in your company, but you should try to get as fit as you possibly can. That way you show up and you are not having to come from behind in the future because you made a really, really bad first impression as a fucking new guy. So obviously I'm very passionate about that because I've seen too many new guys show up unfit, and it blows my mind. It personally blows my mind when that happens, but it still continues to happen. So hopefully if you are in language or you're going to be in language someday and you listen to this, hopefully this kind of lights a fire under your ass and gets you in the gym and gets you out on the trails running. So best of luck. Next question. We'll do 2 more. Did the 2 and 5 mile plan times 2 and got faster, but still need work? Do 2 and 5 mile again or switch to Jack Gazelle 2.0? I would probably do the latter. Doing that 2 times through is not a huge deal, but I probably would not suggest doing 2 and 5 mile 3 times through. You're just going to hit points of diminishing returns. And Jack Gazelle 2 is still plenty of running, so you'll continue to make running progress, but it'll be a little bit different. And also you'll be able to work on some strength, work on some overall athleticism, and it's a little bit less running biased. So honestly, it's going to be a decent break for you. If you just do running improvement programs over and over again that have speed work in them, you're just kind of going to hit points of diminishing return at some point because that's just too long to do speed work. A good 12 to maybe 24 weeks, which is, I think the program's like 13 or 14 weeks long. So that's like 2 times through, is the most that I would recommend doing like very consistent speed work without taking a break to do mostly easy running and maybe some strides just to kind of maintain it, or hopping on a different program where you can get new stimuli in different types of runs, as well as you can get back into a little bit more lifting. So JG2 would be a good idea. And then you could, if you still need work, you could hop back on to 2 and 5 mile, or either the end of June or early July, the new program, Run, Ruck, Lift, will be out. So that's another option too. It'll be unlike any other programs I've made before, but it'll be more of a general running and rucking development program as well as strength. And you can use it for various different selections. There's a lot of different menu items. It's almost like an a la carte depending on what you're going for. So it is going to be a killer program, but because of that, it takes a lot of work and time. So it's still going to take me a little while, but should be out probably in the next 6-7 weeks. Next question. Is there such a thing as too much mileage if you're running 40 to 45 miles per week at zone 2? Is increasing from 40 to 45 miles per week a waste of time, or is that enough of a base for SFAS? So yes, there is absolutely such thing as too much mileage. What is it? Very different for everyone. Some people respond really well to high mileage. Other people don't need as much mileage. As long as you're being very intentional with your running, for the most part, you don't usually need to be really high mileage, especially for selection where running is just one component, one smaller component. Is 40 to 45 miles per week enough for a base for selection? 100%. It's more than enough. I would, however, if you're only running in zone 2, I would definitely change that pretty quickly and start doing some strides, doing some hill sprints, doing some pickups at least before you get into actually doing some speed work. Because if you only run in zone 2, super duper easy, and you continue to just put 40 to 45 mile weeks on top of each other and stack them, or even if you go up, which it's not a definite no to go up, but right now you probably don't need to. I would continue holding what you got and start adding some strides after 1 or 2 of those runs, and or some hill sprints on one of the days, like really, really short 8 to 10 second hill sprints, long rest periods, max effort. That way you're getting used to running fast, but you're also not doing so in a super fatiguing manner. And then you can start doing more run specific stuff like speed specific quality workouts and go from there. But definitely plenty of mileage and mileage is not everything. It's definitely a lever that you can pull. If you want to get better at running, upping your mileage is one great option, but there's a limit for everyone, and it's different for everyone, and it depends on your goals. But for this goal in particular, you're totally fine where you're at. I would just consider starting to make some adjustments and making your runs a little bit more intentional. Not that zone 2 is not intentional, but it is missing some of the intents, especially because you're up this high mileage and you're just running easy. There's really no need to just continue only running zone 2 because it's going to just be harder to build speed on the back end. So that's my recommendation. And that is the last question for today. Thank you guys very much for listening. I will be back soon with another episode. Till then, Terminator out.